Last night, I had the unfortunate experience of watching both television, of watching terrestrial TV, I think it's called. It's not that I wanted to, it's just that there was nothing on Sky. And although I've got Netflix, to be honest with you, I only use Netflix to watch movies, and sometimes I don't want to watch a movie. So as I've got older, I've got more into non-fiction, you know. I make an exception for the Marvel movies, just quietly. I went to the very first Avengers movie and was hooked on that series. Took the kids to it. I took the kids to it because they were the kids. It was the first Avengers one, you know, when they all got together, that very first one. I think they did Iron Man first, and then they did the Avengers. And it was great. And I was hooked. So I think, pretty sure I took the kids to most of them after that. So last night I decided, no, there's nothing to watch. And there was no sport of any consequence on Sky. Hardly is these days, just saying. And so why am I paying for Sky? That's a very good question, Michael. And they're about to sit down with the New Zealand Rugby Union and negotiate the next 5 years. Boy, that's going to be an interesting conversation this year. So I watched TV1 News last night, and I had the misfortune to then watch TV3/News Hub. And there were two stories there that I thought demonstrated exactly why, A, people don't watch the mainstream media anymore, but B, why we're so pissed off, can I just say. We're so irritated with the wankers, and that's the only possible word that I could use to describe what I saw last night, with the wankers who make up the news. The wankers, the whingers, the wallies that make up the news. The triple W's. Last night I watched a piece on Television1 News to do with the realtor Janet Dixon. Now, Janet Dixon apparently is a very successful real estate agent in the North Island, who has run, apparently, for a long time, a very successful business, working for, a real estate agency. I think it's Harcourts is reputable, blah, blah, blah. Janet Dixon has decided to make a stand because something has been imposed upon her by the Real Estate Authority. That's the group that look after her. I think what are they called? The Real Estate Institute of New Zealand. Is that them? Or Real Estate Authority. I don't know if they're two different people. I think they're the same people. To make her learn compulsory Maori, a professional development course called Te Kakano, the Seed, for her to continue to have a real estate license. And a series of modules she has to learn to, quote, develop and deepen her understanding of Maori culture, language and custom, particularly with respect to land, and an understanding of the historical context of Te Taririti o Waitangi. During each module, she is required to form, quote unquote, a theoretical understanding to examples of practical application of this program in your workplace. You will have gained some background knowledge when the need arises to engage with Maori, local iwi and hapu, Maori land, sacred sites, and how this could relate to real estate transactions, including compulsory learning of Te Reo Māori, the Maori language. Now, unsurprisingly, Janet Dixon said, none of this is relevant to my client base or anything I'm doing. I don't want to do it. And I shouldn't have to do it. You're imposing this. This is just some sort of woke madness, I think she's described it as. And the real estate agents industry pushed back and said, well, if you don't do it, you will lose your license and your livelihood. Now, her case has been taken up by Don Brash and Hobson's Choice, and you'll know that of that lobby group. But Television1, and so we can talk about that as much as you like, but that's fine. So we've got one of these, woke cultural clashes carrying on, and it's freedom of speech and thought and stuff against somebody trying to impose another set of conditions, almost in the wake of, I have to say, mandates to do with COVID in a funny sort of way, aren't they? They're correlative, or at least they're symbolically correlative, upon a group of people who don't want to have to do that and can't see any fundamental relevance of why they should do it, and it's never affected them in the past, so why should it affect them in the future, blah, blah, blah. No, it was Television One's news reporting of that. This is what Television One News did in reporting this last night. First of all, they put on their Maori Affairs reporter. Now, to be honest with you, I understand that and I don't. On the one hand, you can say, well, it is a Maori Affairs sort of issue. No, it's an issue that affects all of us, so you can't confine it into the ghetto that is Maori Affairs. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is, when I put my Maori Affairs reporter on it, who happens to be a young Maori woman on Television One News, I'm thinking, as a Pākehā man, going to get a bias. It'd be a bit like putting Don Brash, I would have thought, in charge of compiling that particular article for TV One News. And three, what does this young Maori woman Maori Affairs reporter for TVNZ now reporting this particular issue do? Goes and interviews Maori, two, including Maori real estate agent, who say, unsurprisingly, I think it's a fantastic idea and she should have to, and some white Jewish dude who is a socialist activist and a sort of woke activist as well. I don't know where the Jewish bit comes in. I don't understand that, but apparently it was in the bio or something in the background. But who has written and been involved in radical activism for all of his life. And for some strange reason, and now works in a university. Oh, God, where else would he work? And it was put up as some sort of expert on this issue. Okay? At no stage was anyone else interviewed. They said Janet Dixon had declined an interview, which is probably fair enough, so would I, thinking that, oh my God. But she put out a statement through her lawyer. Don Brash wasn't interviewed. There was nobody else who had a dissenting view. That was it. And and for those of you who saw that particular item last night, you could have only gained the impression that Janet Dixon was some sort of antediluvian racist who was trying to resist not only progressive politics in this country, but an understanding of our deeply religious, spiritual, and wonderfully culture called the Maori culture and language. And it was some sort of insult to the indigenous folk of this country. That was the first article I saw last night. And I just went, oh my God, that is bias with a capital B. And as I was watching last night that particular phrase, I was thinking, so if anybody did have the misfortune, and I think it was sort of like the second lead item or the third lead item last night on TV1's news, there is the attempt to brainwash New Zealand, the other B word, brainwash New Zealand on a nightly basis and get New Zealanders to come to a view that the learning of compulsory Maori by real estate agents and anybody who resists it is somehow wrong, racist and muddle-headed. I mean, we don't even have compulsory Maori, dear Lord, for schooling, compulsory schooling in this country, but dear Lord, there's some middle-aged Pākehā real estate agent, been in the business for a couple of decades, now required to sit there and learn all about te ao Māori and mātauranga Māori and a whole series of Māori words that she'll never use ever in her life and doesn't use in her work. Your thoughts on that one? The second one is talking about TV1 again. Jack Tame now has today taken off and started to attack the government. Now, Jack Tame, remember election night? Yeah, you remember election night, TV1's coverage of election night. Who do they have? John Campbell, Jack Tame, Jessica Mackay. Those were the three presenters and reporters of Television One's coverage, the state-funded broadcaster of which you and I pay our tax dollars to, support, good, and seem to have a choice in it. Those were the three presenters of the election night, weren't they? Remember that? And remember how glum and sort of not very happy they were with the result.
It was terrible.
Well, now, we all know that Campbell is a biased arsehole. I'm sorry, I'm going to use that word. I don't often use that word, but it's just his inability to understand his own political bias just infuriates me. He hides behind some sort of moralistic, progressive, academic defence, which is, oh, well, we're all biased, that's who we are. But he is more than happy to lay into anybody that he considers doesn't agree with him, and uses the agencies of the state to do so. And he does so on a regular basis, and we've talked about that before. But now it's Jack Tame doing exactly the same thing. Jessamine Mackay is gone. Thank God for that. John Campbell, sadly, is still there. He's the chief correspondent of Television New Zealand One News. Just think about that for a moment. He's the chief correspondent. That's his title. And now Jack Tame, who hosts the other primary current affairs program on Television One News, has now written an article hopping into the government and saying it's appalling what they're doing in terms of introducing obligations upon long-term unemployed in this country, over 100,000 of them, to in actual fact go and work if the work's offered, and how, quote unquote, this won't reduce child poverty. Ta-da! You know, how are the two even vaguely related? The issue of child poverty, which we will talk about a little bit later on, and the issue of I'm a lazy effing beneficiary who is sat on my ass for over a year, in many cases 2 or 3. There's work everywhere around me, employers screaming out for me to work. I'm getting a good dollop now, and I also could actually get more money through child support or family support that's being offered by the government as well if I should work. And I actually could be providing excellent money to support my children, but I'm not going to. I'm going to sit on the dole. You know, and there's Jack Tame saying, how dreadful that you would introduce sanctions, in other words, sort of a stick, to drive these people into a job that exists just down literally the road, and make and improve the lives of the children who are currently living in child poverty. This, according to Jack Tame, is just wrong. And there is the latest article penned on Television One News website. You can see it for yourself. So let me get this right. We know the philosophical direction that the chief correspondent of Television One News is travelling. They've got a Maori Affairs reporter who's determined not to present any other side of the argument other than the one that suits her, that in actual fact there should sort of be some compulsion that you've not only got to understand the Maori language, but you've in actual fact got to learn Maori ways, customs and philosophical spookiness all over the place just to hold down a job. And then we've got Jack Tame who's saying the government's wrong because they're going to actually make child poverty worse when they haven't even been in charge of the statistics, and this is appalling. At what point are we going to get journalism? At what point are we actually going to get, here is the news, this is what's happening, these are the facts, and then let you and I decide for ourselves? What we are getting is polemics, politics, and persuasion from our state broadcaster on a nightly basis to inculcate and indoctrinate us to a particular political point of view that I have to say is so far left of centre it doesn't even belong in the Labour Party. This is the one group, journalists, journalism, Television One News, our state broadcaster in particular, who refuse to accept the results of last year's general election and the rejection of their political philosophy and of their political perspective and standpoint in this world. They are an insult and they are an appalling, arrogant refrain of the journalistic sector in this country. And they are representative of it. These are the people at the top of the pyramid. These are the primary leaders of. And these are the people utilising our money to indoctrinate us on a regular and nightly and daily basis. Isn't it time we just got rid of them? Isn't it time we said, no more state support for TVNZ, You go it alone. There's plenty of other news sites and sources around. We don't need to prop up an institution that can't find its own way into the future, that is determined to indoctrinate us all into a perspective that we have almost universally rejected. Your thoughts?